Hello, podcast friends, and welcome to the PrimeKnowledge podcast. Today in the studio, I have Joe Catcheside, and we're going to have a short little interview and get to know Joe. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you very much. Greetings and salutations. I would say good morning, but it might not be morning when people listen to it.
No, it could be any time. Could be any time. The joy of a podcast. Listen anywhere, at any time. So, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, how you got started in business, and just let the audience know a little bit about you?
Yeah, well, how long have you got?
We've got some time.
Okay, so we'll start with me being born in Lancashire, back somewhere in the last millennium. Family moved around a little bit when I was a kid, but I would say I regard the Northwest as being my sort of spiritual home. I did all my high schooling in Warrington. I just went to the bog standard normal local comprehensive school. I did quite well at school, went from there to Cambridge and studied English at Fitzwilliam College, and from then had absolutely no idea what I was going to do, what the point was, where I was headed, anything like that. So I went and worked in Japan for a little bit teaching English because I couldn't think of a reason not to, and somebody offered me a job, so I went, I better do that. And it probably took me a couple of years to actually sort of find my feet as to find a profession and get involved in something in a business sense. And I stumbled into business-to-business conferencing as a profession in London, partly because the girl I was dating at the time had got a job in that industry, so when I went for an interview I knew exactly what to say because I knew exactly what she did. And I did that for a couple of years as an employee, got headhunted by a different company, and then eventually, having met a wholly more suitable partner, she and I then started our own conference company, originally as an outsourced provider to other companies, and then eventually we funded our own events, and that kind of really launched us into the world of sort of entrepreneurial business ventures. We also got married, which helped, and we started investing in property as well, so that was kind of the kind of twin strands of business and property all bound in the same relationship that covered everything that I did and still do in my life. And a kind of big change then after that was when the magazine that we'd worked with was sold. We had to become our own venture funders, and then when we had kids we thought actually maybe we need something a bit more kind of stable than betting the farm on running a successful couple of conferences every year. So then we started an estate agency, 2005, ran that for 16 years, thinking it would be great for a property investment business, which it wasn't. It was a complete nightmare for the property investment business. And then we sold out of that a couple of years ago, and we're doing all sorts of stuff, consultancy and conferencing and properties, and all the different strands of all the different things we've done are kind of coming together in an amalgam of different portfolio of kind of business and personal and property interests. I don't know, that's kind of where we are, how we got there.
So I know that as well as the business side of things, you've got obviously your family and you're really into your sport. So how big a part does the sport and rugby play in your?
Good question. So in my youth I played rugby, started off with Union Minis actually as a kid, but then really developed a passion for rugby league when we moved back to Warrington, and it's the predominant sport there, even ahead of football, despite being in between Manchester and Liverpool. Warrington doesn't have a top flight football team, but it has one of the best rugby league teams. So played a lot of rugby league as a kid, played to a decent standard, but played as a shirt filler alongside lads who went on to play internationally, so I was the worst player in a very good team. And actually at university and afterwards discovered I've got much more aptitude as a coach and as a trainer of players than I have as a performer. Also I got injured in my early 20s, so I haven't actually played a game of rugby since I was 22. But I've now been coaching for 30 years. So I have a great privilege down in Exeter where I live, that the University of Exeter, despite being a long way from rugby league heartlands, have a very, very good rugby league team that I was able to kind of step into and get involved in and coach, and I've now been involved in that for about 15 years. And it's brilliant coaching students because they're clever and you tell them what to do and they listen and then they do it. Whereas I've coached community teams and kids, and sometimes it's just you're kind of like herding cats, and that's not even with the kids, that's with the adult teams. So I coach every winter through a student rugby league season, and it's awesome, brilliant, really satisfying thing to do.
Yeah, I coached not in league but in rugby union for quite a few years, and it's something I'd really love to get back into. And my sons are both 8 and 4, and they've just started in rugby. And I completely understand about at the moment at 8, it's just trying to get them to all stop just running around, following the ball. Like, no, stand in a line, go forward, run forward, not backwards constantly. So yeah, I know what you mean. It's so difficult to kind of go, you know, I've coached kind of mid-teens to kind of 16, 17-year-olds, and at that point you can really go, cool, today we're going to really focus on this core skill and this thing within the game that's really important that I've identified in a previous game is not working, and you go, cool, this is the drill, this is how we're going to do it, then we're going to put it into a game, and the guys really work well with that. So yeah, me and Joe had a conversation recently about the power of coaching with people, and how it really gets you in a position where you have to be so in the right area, like mentally, to be able to give feedback in a moment and deliver good kind of content to people and stuff, and how that related into business and into sport, and kind of got me really thinking about maybe getting back into coaching. So it's definitely something that Joe's really pushed me towards starting to do that again, so that's been awesome. So I've always loved how we can use kind of sport and business together in a way. Obviously within sport, and especially professional sport, a mindset is a massive part of that. Do you feel that there's some things within sport that can relate to business and mindset?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of interesting. I was thinking of this on the way driving up here, that what we do in a sporting context is we will coach a technique, and then you increasingly put pressure upon the players once they've mastered that technique, and then it becomes a skill. The definition of skill being a technique practiced under pressure, and you make it more and more like a game situation, and then eventually you hope when you get into that game situation, everything's familiar, and that you recognise the situations you're in, and you've already got your preconditioned response. I remember listening to Clive Woodward, the England Rugby Union World Cup winning coach, giving a seminar recently and saying, decisions that you have to make for the first time out on the field when you're playing are bad decisions. That you should understand and anticipate all of the circumstances that you're likely to be in while you're on the training ground or in the classroom, so that when you get into a live environment, it's familiar and you know how to respond. And mindset is very much a part of that. If you feel going into a game or a business meeting or whatever kind of context that you're stepping into, that you have thought through all of the possibilities, and that you can anticipate what the responses of the people you're working with, your teammates, your colleagues around you, on the people that you're, if it's adversarial, competing against, or if it's collaborative, looking to build a partnership with. When those scenarios present themselves in real life, then you are prepared for them, and that in turn gives you that kind of confidence and positivity in your mindset, that actually you know that you could deal with whatever problems might come at you because you've worked through the scenarios. And I think sport does that very well, because it has to. Sport, when you listen to professional coaches talk, is the ultimate in results-driven businesses, because the results manifest themselves every weekend when you play your next game. But I was also thinking, kind of interesting, there's a couple of points of discrepancy as well, that sport is a very good analogy for business, but sports businesses are awful at learning the lessons from the analogies of their own environment. So the number of, I think we've lost 3 top flight rugby union clubs in the last 12 months.
We have, yeah.
And in my sport of rugby league, although we haven't lost a top flight team, we've lost 2 development area clubs that you would regard as being very, in a business context, important for extending the brand. So we've lost a club in Newcastle, or we've lost a club in London. And you look at the business administration of sport and think, you are not learning any of the lessons that you could take as analogies from what you actually have to deliver on the field every week, and the teams and the players that go out and play. And I was also thinking, in terms of going back to that idea of a skill being a technique applied under pressure, in places away from sport, but in its sort of ultimate resilience testing, things like the military or disaster response, you get wargaming of scenarios. You get NATO bringing together armies of multiple nations with a command and control structure across language groups and local and national priorities, and they'll wargame kind of multi-force operations with Air Force and Navy and Army personnel, and they'll examine scenarios for a number of days. Or you get disaster response teams where they'll do a major exercise and they'll envisage some sort of national catastrophe, I don't know, an air crash or something, and they'll bring in people from the police and the fire service and the ambulance services, and they'll stress test everything, learn from the mistakes where the command and control structures break down, see what they do really well, but most of all put their organisations in a position of resilience so that they know how to respond when things go wrong. And you do that for major things, but how many businesses do that? The most I can think of that we did, even in our agency business, is there were fire alarms that they test every Monday morning. And that was about it. So the fire alarm goes off and you make sure the fire alarms are working, and that's it. There was never a, what happens if the business systems go down? What happens if you lose the internet for 48 hours? What happens if you're subject to a cyber attack? So in a business context, if we'd have faced any of those major challenges, we would have been making up on the fly. And going back to Clive Woodward's comments, you make bad decisions because you've not thought it through, prepared for it.
Yeah, I listened to the same thing with Clive Woodward that you talked about, and when they got to that final play in extra time with the time running out, but they knew that the play was, they work up the field, they play for a penalty, or Johnny would drop in the pocket, and they knew the plays they had to do, and they knew where they needed to be. They knew exactly in the pitch where was the best place for him to take that kick, and it was very specific. And I think as you were talking through the things, it was really making me think about how that relates into business, and how we tend to put a lot of time into sales, revenue, forecasting, looking at things within the business, and then maybe don't put enough time into looking at things and going, cool, but what if this happens, but what if that happens? And I think I've done it in the past where you're so focused on what it is you've got to do that day, and you're not looking far enough forward that you've gone, cool, this is the revenue forecast, and like you say, what happens if this customer stops spending money, or what happens if this happens? I think as you were talking through that, I was like thinking about how that relates to kind of training within a business, not only as a business owner, how you train yourself, but then how do you train your team around you? So when you were running the estate agency business, how many staff were you employing at that point?
At its biggest, the company was about 15 staff.
Okay, and how did you find managing 15 members of staff?
Now there's a question. To be honest, Melinda, my wonderful wife and business partner, is far better at the soft skills, and so a lot of the kind of the personnel management stuff was kind of felt instinctively within her remit as to how she looked after and built relationships with people. I tend to be in our business and personal relationships, I'm sort of the visionary one that goes, let's go over there, let's do this thing, there's a great big thing we could try, and I get excited and start fires, and then I'll kind of be off in the clouds, and it's Melinda that actually does the delivery and the implementation and the focus and the detail and the managing it through. So a lot of that kind of stuff fell to her, but it was a challenge always, partly because you've got competing personalities, but also because an employer to employee relationship is not an entirely balanced one. So we would always try to look to the best personal interests of our employees, trying to accommodate their life and their circumstances, whether it would be their kind of family challenges or childcare issues, or one of our key members of staff lost a driving licence at one point in a job that was kind of fundamental, so we kind of restructured what everyone else was doing to look out for her interests, so we would have had a reason to dismiss her, but that's not kind of how we operated, because it was very much everything on a personal level, but that's not necessarily reciprocated, and you can't expect it to be. So when an opportunity presents to a member of staff that they've got an opportunity somewhere else that you can't deliver, or even they get to a point where for their own personal development they want to go and do something different, either a different employee or a different direction in their career, they're absolutely at liberty to do that, and that's kind of right and how it should be. But it does make that kind of management issue very difficult, because you are kind of as friendly as possible and can build friendships from a relationship with employees, but ultimately while they're still employees, they're not your friend when it suits them to go and do something different. And you just have to kind of understand that that's a flexible dynamic that's quite can be difficult to manage. Now, I'm very happy to say that most of the people that we employed, a couple of people came back when they'd left us, and most of those people that we had employee working relationships with are now still part of our friendship group. Not everyone, but that's true for any set of people you meet. The kids you're at school with, some are still mates, and some you don't even recognise on social media. But by and large, that kind of the soft skills in business are a set of compromises, I think, and my good lady is much better and adept at managing that kind of side of things.
I don't think we've ever talked about this in the same way, because everything you're saying there fits very much into my working relationship with my other half, I'm literally, everything you're saying, I'm like, this is literally me and Reg. Every day, I'm the one that's like, I've got this great idea, and she's like, can you not just finish yesterday's task? I'm very good at starting things, I'm very poor at finishing things, and I didn't realise that till recently. And I've sort of done the same with managing teams and stuff, and I'm very good at kind of doing that, but without the detail behind it and without the sort of soft skill of, and I think some of that might be the difference between us with being male and female as well, as where she's has a lot softer edge to things sometimes, and it's difficult within business to not take the emotion into the occasion. Like, it's so hard not to go, this is really wound me up. You know, you can support a member of staff over and over again, and then ultimately they can leave, and you can put all this time in, and they leave. Like, and that's just business. I think sometimes it's so hard not to take that personally. And I think this brings into a really nice point. I really want to talk to you about kind of the idea of work-life balance and how that works for you. I know, obviously, like I just said, is you have the same working relationship as I do, and it's quite interesting to talk to other people about how they manage work-life balance with family, with being in a business with your partner, and just kind of how that works for you. How does that work for you guys?
It's kind of interesting because Melinda and I met at work. We were working in the same company, and she's actually Australian. She transferred in from the Australian office, came into the UK office on her first day. Obviously, unbeknown to her, we'd been talking about who's this new Australian girl coming into our team, and I'd already joked that I was going to make a play for her. We could get together. I had our mutual boss read out her CV to me so that I would be able to go, oh yeah, ballet dancing, I love that. Oh, rock climbing, yeah, it's one of my favourite things. It was sort of Groundhog Day, kind of knowing everything about her before she rocked up. As it is, she came to the office on day one, and I was one of the first people that she met. So the first day in the UK, we met in work. And maybe because it's how and where we met, that we were work colleagues before we became more than that, that's always been a kind of a taken as a given in our relationship. And she tells a story that her friends went so I got headhunted to a different company. So for a while we were both in London but working in the same industry in different companies. And then I got, for various reasons, fed up of being in London and had enough of the job. I just wanted to get out. So I moved down to Devon with a good friend of mine who had been my flatmate in London and was a friend from school. And we had 12 months of a kind of a distance relationship. And then eventually she and I went into business together, but she working from a client's office in London with me working in Exeter. And then eventually, once we worked that project through, got some more business on the back of it that wasn't geographically contingent as to where we were, she then moved down to Exeter. And her friends were like, are you mad? You are moving in with a bloke that you work with in a city where you don't know anyone else. So your life and your personal life and your home life are all vested in this 2-bedroom flat in a town you've never been to. What are you doing? But actually then and still, we work better when we are working on things together or in parallel. And in terms of work-life balance, that's kind of a really interesting question, because I've never... My question, even before I got into the world of work as a student, was, if you had unlimited finance, if you didn't have to ever worry about the money, what would you do? Well, once you've done all the partying and travelling around the world and getting ridiculously drunk and paying off everyone's mortgages, on the first day after you've done that, what do you do? What gets you out of bed? Because if you can work out what that is, and then you can go and do it, you don't need to make the money because you've already succeeded on your own terms as to what's the thing that you really want to do. And my challenge always has been that there is no one thing I want to do. I want to do lots of different things. Kind of like you just said, like loads of ideas, visionary, horizon, let's go there, no, let's do this, let's do all of these things. And I've never wanted to do anything enough to want to do it to the exclusion of everything else. So my kind of work-life balance has always been to try and do as many of the things that I want to do as humanly possible and to get paid for some of them so that I don't have to worry about money when I'm doing the things that I don't get paid for. And I'll give you a classic example of that is I used to, when I first moved to Exeter and before Mel moved down, so I had a lot more kind of personal free time where I didn't have to consider what somebody else was doing. Literally at the top of the hill from where I live, there's a brilliant music venue called Exeter Cavern. It's still there. If people probably know the band Muse, it's where the band Muse came from. It's the environment that gave birth to that particular band. And you'd go to the Cavern every night and there'd be 2 or 3 local bands playing. And I'd pay me £3 and go in and buy a pint and watch 3 or 4 local bands playing, and everybody in the audience were doing different bands that would play on different nights, and it was just a great environment to be in. But quite soon into being in Exeter, I started putting on events at the Cavern, and I'd end up going to the Cavern, watching the same bands, but instead of me going and paying £3 to sit in the corner with a pint, everyone paid me £3 to come and sit in the corner with a pint, and I'd see the same bands in the same venue and have the same night, but I'd walk home with £50 or £100 and having been paid to do the thing I wanted to do. Now, it wasn't enough money to make a living, but it was the kind of principle I've tried to operate of work out what it is you want to do and then find a way to get paid for some of it. And the family have always been part of that. So not just with Melinda and I, but we've never excluded our kids from our conversations about business. We take them to business conferences, they see what we do. My son has very much kind of bought into it. That's the journey that he's on. He's a student studying business, marketing and management in the University of Sussex, and he's entrepreneurial, runs his own gaming business. He's got a job setting up events for the university as well, so he's actually got more disposable cash than anybody else in the family. My daughter probably less so, but she's very much gone down the artistic and music route, so she's studying music and English literature at Sixth Form College and is very kind of independent minded as well. It may or may not be that the business side of stuff has gone together with that, but you know, we managed bands for a little while after we'd run our rock nights, so everything we've done has tried to bring a kind of a holistic approach to it, and I think in different ways the kids are finding their own space to do the same sort of thing because that's the environment that they've grown up in. So short answer is I don't really see a difference between work-life balance. I think work and life are part and parcel of the same thing. If you're brilliant at football, you get paid for it, but if you're crap, you still might go down the park and kick the ball around. You're doing the same thing. It's just where do you get your money? What pays for the bits that you don't get paid for?
Yeah, I think it's a really great way of looking at it. To be fair, like it's something that it's that thought pattern I wish I had at 21 years old, where it took me till mid-30s before I started really looking inward and going, what are you doing this for? Like, what is the reason you go to work every day? Why are you doing this thing? And by that point, I had 2 kids. I had a business that was at scale. I had, similar to you, I had 10 members of staff, 2 commercial buildings. I had 8 different vehicles on lease where we were supplying fit and work. And at that point, I was then like, why am I actually doing this? And it's I think it's one of the most powerful things I give to my kids is really kind of get them to understand what it is they really want to do. And your way of going, well, do that and try and make money from it is such a nice way of doing it and going, okay. Or the other way I look at it is obviously with my investor hat on is to go, well, actually, could you invest in property on the side to create cash flow so that you can then do the thing you want to do for free if that's what you want to do? You know, if you want to work for a charity and that's what you want to do, like, do that. But going about it in that kind of way, I never got that guidance. It was like, just go and get a job. Like, there was never any thought, because I don't think that was just where my parents were. That they've always worked, and they instilled in me hard work is everything. They didn't show me kind of where to put that hard work, and it was very much like you turn up at work, you work hard, you go home. There was never anything about there's more to it than that. So I really like your way of thinking about things, and I really wish I'd kind of had that when I was younger. So what is something you're working on currently at the moment? So what's your kind of big thing at the minute? What sort of things are you working on at the moment that light your fire, get you going?
Okay, that's interesting, because I was going to go off in a slightly different direction before you asked the question, but actually the answer to the question is kind of where I was going to go anyway, because first and foremost and always I think you need to be working on yourself. So where I was going to go, and this is kind of an interesting personal experience, revelation, discovery, however you like to phrase it, partly pay credit to a mutual mentor of ours, Tony Gargan, who pointed me in the direction for this, but it's kind of a personal journey always is to understand yourself better and how you fit in the world and what role you're playing in that world, and how your personal preconceptions and decisions might influence and shape that. And one of the things that Tony made me reflect on is my relationship to money, because I've just outlined that my vision was do what you are driven by as passion and try and make money from enough of it not to have to care about money for the rest of it, or not to have to give time exclusively to one thing that means you don't have the diversity of opportunity to do the other things. And my journey from being an employee to being an entrepreneur in conferencing, I have always kind of told myself as a story and used as a story to explain to others as to how we thought of things, because the short version is I made a conference which I created from scratch and did all the work on, but as an employee I was paid my 5% profit share, and that turned out to be 2,000 quid, which meant the conference, even with all the spurious overheads that the company had laden on it, made a profit of 40 grand. And at that point I was organising 10 events a year and was being paid 20,000 salary. So one conference had made double my salary, but I had 9 more to do that year. And I then took that as an opportunity to go, well, I could just organise one conference, double my salary, work 1/10 as hard as I'm working at the moment, and have a much nicer life, and then go and watch loads of bands and go to sporting events and be involved in all the other things I want to do. And not as a self-aggrandising thing, but I'd always, that had been my version of the story. But actually, on reflection, what I didn't do was go, oh, I could leave and organise 10 conferences a year and make 400,000 quid. And I had never really kind of realised the extent to which doing what I want to do had become somewhat detached from finance as a concept. Because I could have done that for 3 years and then retired. And that might have been a better way to view the trade-off of my time than to still be doing things to generate revenue 20 years later, because I'd only looked at the kind of the immediacy of my work-life balance, if you want to phrase it in those terms. So now I'm actually reflecting upon what I've done in the past and my relationship with money, and how many of the things that I need to do, I need to deliver at scale to a broader audience to be able to give more sort of benefit to a much wider market, so that the money is more abundant. Because although it's not the money that I'm doing it for, the money is almost a benchmark of how many people I'm helping and how much I'm giving out to the world. And perhaps on occasion that doing what I want to do has been more of a selfish thing than it as a kind of an altruistic giving back to the world. But with a long-term perspective, if you can get the alignment of the finance and the delivery of things that matter to the world, and the satisfaction of your personal kind of drivers and ambitions to be involved in a lot of things, then maybe that's a better balance than what you just said that you kind of liked and admired. Maybe now I'm starting to question quite how far I've taken it in the wrong direction, or at least in the direction that there are other alternatives. So again, long answer to your first question, what am I working on? Always myself and what I do and how I show up in the world and what I'm supposed to deliver to the world. In practical terms, in business, we're working together on something that came out of a conversation in that mentorship environment, helping people understand the process of selling a business, not just in terms of numbers, but actually in terms of emotion and the psychology of it all, which again is that kind of self-reflective thing as well. I know both of us have gone through in different ways that process of parting with a role and with a business that we had a lot of personal identity vested in, and then what it's like the day after and a week after and a month after, and how that progress change kind of goes on through your life. So I think both of us have recognised that that's something neither of us were prepared for, and therefore we've got messages that we can help people go through the same things that we went through. In terms of property, again, we're looking at ways to, being estate agents for a long time, and I indicated it wasn't a very good place to be a property developer, to build a property business, because we had obligations to the people who came to us to sell houses, to work for everything in their best interests, and then it was very difficult to work with other agents to buy property because they saw us as a competition, so they didn't really want to talk to us about anything. But now that we're not in that direct competition environment, we're looking at how we can help estate agents and property developers and people in that space to better form constructive relationships. So we've got years and years of experience and knowledge from both sides of the tracks. Or, we've been landlords, we've been tenants, we've been owners, we've been sellers, we've been buyers, we've been agents, we've been investors. And we're trying now to kind of synthesize that information to help everybody build better relationships across the whole range of the kind of housing market and the property sector in the UK and possibly abroad as well. And I'm still doing coaching. I'm coaching my lads this afternoon, and hopefully we'll give the University of Gloucestershire a good kick it, but we'll see how we get on.
Yeah, awesome. So I think about that a lot as well, the whole idea of this work-life balance. I don't believe there is balance. I don't think it can ever be balanced. I think it's just kind of like a chart that just keeps flicking from side to side, and one day, 1 week, 1 month you might be really balanced, and then one day, 1 week, 1 month you might be completely towards work, and then vice versa, where you're completely, maybe you're holidaying or you're spending a lot of time around family. I just don't think it kind of works, and that's why I'm sort of interested in the way people look at it. And I think you go through parts of your life, don't you, where you go from certain things and backwards and forwards, and it works depending on your kind of requirements for all of those things.
Well, yeah, and I think you've actually just something's occurred to me while you're talking. It's kind of part of my deep lying philosophy is that if something is true, you'll find examples of it everywhere. We are not the first people to walk this earth, and actually really good ideas you'll find in Greek mythology or in kind of ancient sort of mythology from the East, or in the stories of the Romans, or in the medieval world, or in Shakespeare, or in Chaucer. So you'll find examples of stuff absolutely everywhere. And the phrase that I was thinking when you were kind of just running through that balance conundrum is that the grass is always greener over there. There is a phrase which perfectly conjures up the fact that wherever you are, you're not content, because it always looks as if you went into a different field, you'd find a much better set of opportunities. And I think actually, I asked Rob Moore this question. I asked him, was contentment the aspiration or the problem? And I thought it was his answers were really interesting, and he kind of very much came down on the side of it's the problem. When you're comfortable and you're happy and you're complacent and you stop, the people who actually achieve stuff are driven by a desire to make things better, whether it's for themselves or for the world around them or for their personal experience and circumstances. As soon as you get comfortable, you stop being creative, you stop thinking outside the box, you stop pursuing new goals and aspirations. So actually that kind of lack of contentment in your environment is an important part of anybody's motivation to change, to better themselves, to disrupt the market, to do things in a different way and look for a better way. But there's also the contradiction that the grass is always greener in the other field, and actually maybe there are times when you need a deep breath and just look around at what you've done. So I don't think you can ever be entirely happy with the world.
No. So I started doing more gratitude journaling and stuff recently, and it's something that I really struggle with, taking what's in my brain and writing it. It's not something that has ever been very comfortable for me, but on a daily basis, just writing down things that you're grateful for, even if it's just, I use like a little 4-minute journal or whatever. It's super simple. 3 things you're grateful for, 3 things you want to achieve today, and then like an affirmation, and then it's normally got like a quote in there. It's quite positive or whatever. So it's quite a good way of just going, cool, well I'm really grateful for, something that happened at home with the family, or I'm really grateful for that business opportunity. I'm really grateful for just I think one of my ones this morning was just my physical health at the moment. I'm physically capable of being able to work out, and I appreciate that. So it's just writing down those things, because sometimes you really take for granted those little things in your life and then you kind of lose track on, oh well, I want this or I want this, and I don't, this part of my life isn't thing. And you know, after selling my business, I went into a new business, and obviously that's a new business. I now don't have staff, and I don't have buildings, and I don't have all these people that need me. It's very much focused on me doing the thing I need to do, which is very difficult to feel like it's enough. So I think you just got to remember this is part of the journey. This is the bit we're going to look back on later and go, cool, we're here now because we put the work in back then to make that happen. So yeah, like you say, this whole life is a roller coaster, and I think getting on the other side of difficult things is where the magic happens. So yeah, I really resonate with a lot of the stuff you're saying. So I'm just going to put this in here because I did have it as a question before, and I put this question to Joe, and then Joe's response to that question was, I'm the worst person to ask, but I think I would like you to share some of this whilst we've got the microphones on. So the question was, what is some good advice for working productively?
Yeah. Oh, well, despite being the worst person to ask, you still asked me. I think ultimately the passion for what you're doing is critical. That, again, going back to that question I was asking myself in my early 20s, what is it that you would do if you could do anything? What is it that you would do right now? What is it that you would like to be doing in 2 years, 5 years' time? What are the things that take time and investment, and what are the things that you can just revel in the moment? So in terms of working productively, you need that constantly need that balance between, if the grass is greener over there, how am I going to get there? But actually I'm in quite a nice place where I am at the moment as well, and let's appreciate what we've got. And it's a tension, that everybody in different ways works through. If you want to be able to speak Portuguese, you're not going to be able to do it in a weekend. You're going to have to set aside some dedicated time, and you're going to have to be consistent in what you do. You're going to have to facilitate ways in which you can take textbook learning or audio tape learning and put it into live situations with real Portuguese native speakers. But equally, if you want to go to the Algarve, you can go down to the travel agent and book a journey now, and it's going to be that combination of, so you want to learn Portuguese, so go and spend some time in Portugal and enjoy the moment of what you're doing, and find some people that you like chatting to who can teach you and learn from them. Keep the long-term goals on the horizon and envision, but do the day-to-day things that you enjoy doing to help you get there. And if you can reconcile the immediate with the long term, then the journey that you've just described is going to be quite a pleasurable one, because you're never doing things that aren't part of the bigger picture, but also give you satisfaction in the moment.
That's a very, very well answered question, because you didn't want to answer it when I asked it earlier, which I thought was funny. So, right, we've talked about lots of different things today. So you've talked a lot about learning, self-development, a lot about kind of if you can do what you want to do and facilitate helping other people. That would be a good purpose for you. So have you got any good book recommendations that have been good books for you, really?
Well, yeah, there is an element to which, I come back to what I said before, that if it's true everywhere. And I'll tell you actually where I got that direct kind of inspiration from. There's a guy that was a lecturer of mine at university, a guy called John Mullen, turns up occasionally on BBC late night shows talking about cultural things, 19th century novelists and that sort of stuff. He's got an interesting bloke. But he was very much of a belief that we need to know stuff ourselves and we need to master things. He didn't want to tell us stuff, he wanted us to go and find out things for ourselves. And we were having a revision class with him, and one of my friends and colleagues asked him a question about Robinson Crusoe. I can't remember what the question was, but he picked up a copy of the book, he made a point and he flicked through and he went, oh look here, for example, and he read something out from the book. And then he flicked through a few more pages and he read something else, like there's another one. And he flicked through another few pages and went, oh yeah, and then he read out, and everything that he read out was directly applicable to the point he just made. And my mate Rachel said to him, do you just know that book so well that you know where to look? And John's answer, which is the thing that stayed with me, was, no, the thing is, if it's true, you'll find examples of it everywhere. And if it's not true, or if you really have to look very hard to find a specific thing, then it's probably not a general truth. So what's a good thing to read? Well, you could start with Shakespeare, you could start with the Bible or the Torah or the hadiths from the Prophet, peace be upon him, or whatever it is you look at, you will find the same kind of teachings and the same kind of learnings there. Now, it might be that your way in is a book, it might be that your way in is Rich Dad Poor Dad, which is one of the first business books. Kind of not business textbooks, but book about how business operates in people's lives on a practical level. And a lot of people in the environments that we move, circles that we move in, have read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and it's kind of a go-to starter book for people in business, understanding how you step away from working hard and being an employee to building assets, and whether it be a company or a property portfolio or stocks and shares, whatever it is, but assets that pay you money and deliver income without the time obligation that leaves you free then to spend your time as you like. Rich Dad Poor Dad's a great book, but then you've got in the Bible, you've got the parable of the talents of the three people given a financial remuneration, and one person buries it, and one person is casually under investment, and one person goes and spends all of it and makes loads of money back. It's the same story. It's just one's in a religious textbook and one's a Japanese American who founded his own businesses and wrote about it. So, short answer, what would be a good book? Read a book that you like, but try and read beyond the simple narrative and look for the kind of the underlying themes that maybe are a little bit more universal, which is why the book you're reading has traction. If a book speaks only to one person, it's not going to be a book you'll ever find. But if the lessons that you take from it are universal, then it doesn't matter whether you're reading it in Harry Potter or where you're reading it. That's kind of a bit of a wishy-washy answer, but
no, I think it's good, because I didn't prep you for that question, so I didn't say, look, cool, bring me 5 books that you've thingied, and for me, like, books are this thing that have helped me get to where I am now. But also I agree with you that universally you will hear a lot of the same books. So I obviously read a lot of business and mindset kind of books, so quite often the content will overlap. You go, well, I've heard this somewhere else, and then that's when you can start to go, well, if I'm hearing it in lots of different books, it's clearly something that's important and it's out there. And I think that's a really good way of looking at it, going, actually, if you're looking at certain things, you're going to find them. And it was actually quite a nice answer, because then there wasn't a lot of specific books in there. So that's good. So that's everything for today's podcast. So great interview, Joe. Thank you very much for coming on. And there's going to be lots more content coming from me and Joe on the PrimeKnowledge podcast. Like, share, subscribe to the podcast. We will start dropping episodes very soon. Thank you for taking the time to listen. And that's us for today. Thank you, Joe.
thank you.